You know, there's this prevailing notion among men, particularly those disillusioned by modern relationships, that they can simply cut off a woman, as if that action alone resolves the psychological entanglement that preceded it. She's gone. I've moved on. They tell themselves that. But let me tell you something, and listen carefully, she is not gone. Not in the way that matters, because you don't just sever emotional history like a dead branch. You don't walk away from psychological archetypes so casually. You're not merely dealing with a person, you're dealing with an idea, a symbol, an emotional blueprint that carved its way into your identity. And what do we know about ideas? They persist. Now you might think you've disconnected. And on the surface, yes, the texts have stopped. The meetings have ceased. The shared routines have dissolved. But underneath that is a tapestry of memory, projection, pain, and longing. It doesn't just go away because you said so. Carl Jung, and this is important, he said that what you resist persists. So if you walk away from a woman, especially one you once valued deeply, without processing that meaning, without understanding what the relationship taught you, and what you were trying to avoid by cutting her off, well, she's not gone. She's haunting you, quietly, persistently. And here's the deeper tragedy: she might never leave. Not in your dreams, not in your habits, not in the archetype you unconsciously chase in your future relationships. Because woman, in the mythological sense, is not a singular entity. She's chaos and order, care and cruelty, mother and lover, and once you've known her, truly known her, she shapes how you see all women, including the ones you haven't met yet. And that's where the danger lies. If you cut her off without integration, without understanding what went wrong, what was needed, what was neglected, then all you're doing is suppressing something that will eventually return. And when it returns, it won't knock politely. It'll come back in the form of distrust, self-sabotage, or emotional numbness. So no, cutting her off doesn't mean she's gone, because the deeper part of her is still there, not as her, the individual, but as a part of your own psyche that now seeks understanding. Gentlemen, the task isn't avoidance. It's transcendence through understanding. It's the difficult work of looking your pain in the eye and saying, what did I learn? Because until you do that, she remains not because she wants to, but because you're still carrying the part of her you refuse to confront. You don't walk away from someone without dragging pieces of them along with you. Attachment isn't something you tear out like a splinter. It's something that wraps itself into the nervous system. The human psyche doesn't just record interactions. It imprints them. A relationship isn't a series of moments. It's a structure in the mind shaped by repetition, emotion, and meaning. When a man connects with a woman, he builds a mental model of her. That model doesn't die the day she walks away. It echoes, it breathes. It sits beneath conscious awareness, silently dictating how he sees trust, intimacy, and love. The nervous system doesn't forget the way she looked at him when he was vulnerable. It doesn't unlearn that comfort her presence brought in times of chaos. What we call cutting off is often a form of denial masquerading as strength mentale. Themselves, they're detached, but their behavior betrays otherwise every time she crosses his mind at 2 a.m. He proves that detachment is a myth. Every song that hits too close is a reminder that she lives in the hidden corridors of memory. There's no delete key in the psyche, there's only repression. And repression always comes at a price. Avoidance is expensive. It costs clarity, peace, and the capacity for future depth. The masculine often wants to solve emotion like a problem. He thinks, if I shut the door hard enough, the noise inside will stop, but the unconscious doesn't respond to force, it responds to truth. You don't get rid of someone by avoiding their name. You only bury the lessons deeper. And when you bury things deep, they grow roots. Those roots entangle your thoughts, your impulses. Your self-worth. To love someone is to psychologically internalize them. She's not just a person anymore. She becomes a symbol, a representation of everything you wanted and lost. She becomes the mirror you avoid, the standard you chase, or the warning sign you mistrust. Even resentment is a form of attachment. It's love poisoned by betrayal. The man who says, I don't care, usually cares the most because indifference doesn't burn, but unresolved connection does. When he avoids her, he's often avoiding himself, the part of himself that was once open, once soft, once unguarded. Attachment forms through vulnerability, and what's vulnerable is never erased. It's protected, hidden, or feared. You can leave her physically, but emotional impressions don't follow geography, they follow meaning. And if she meant something, anything, she remains, not because she's holding on, but because you hold on to what you don't resolve. You carry what you refuse to examine. People don't haunt us. Our interpretations of them do. Memories we take to become mythologies. You might remember her kindness and forget the conflict he might remember her betrayal and forget his own wounds. Memory isn't loyal to truth. It's loyal to emotion. And attachment is emotion carved in time. What he thinks he cut off was only the surface, the deep structures, the neural pathways. They're still active. They fire when he sees a stranger who resembles her. They ache when he smells something familiar. They stir when silence becomes too loud. That's not obsession. That's biology catching up with the illusion of control. To bond with someone is to open psychological territory. You gave her land inside you, and you didn't take it back. You just closed your eyes. But closing your eyes doesn't mean it isn't there. It means you're choosing blindness over confrontation. It means you're risking future pain to avoid present discomfort. Men often learn too late that ignoring a wound doesn't heal it. It festers, it shapes. How he listens to other women, how he interprets tone, how he fears closeness. That's not just heartbreak, that's architecture. Emotional structures don't vanish. They evolve if you suppress a connection. It resurfaces as anxiety, detachment, or projection. He might blame the next woman for the sins of the last. He might punish loyalty because he expects abandonment. That's how ghosts operate, through substitution. Not every woman will hurt you, but the one who did may become the lens through which you see them all. And until you question that lens, you are not free. You are tethered to a version of the past you never understood. Freedom isn't walking away, it's integration. It's the brutal honesty of asking, what did this teach me? What did I ignore? What patterns did I repeat? Who was I in her presence, and who did I become after? Most men are afraid of that inquiry because it reveals their own flaws, their own mistakes, their own complicity in the collapse. So instead, they choose silence, and silence becomes suffering. Unspoken pain is still pain. Suppressed emotion is still energy. And energy needs an outlet. If it doesn't come out in words, it comes out in reactions, in cynicism, in mistrust, in the inability to connect deeply again. That is the true cost of cutting someone off without processing. It's not just about her, it's about you, your identity, your emotional capacity, your future. Think you left her, but maybe, just maybe, you left yourself the version of you that dared to feel, that risked vulnerability, that trusted enough to let someone in when you shut the door on her. You might have locked that part of yourself inside, and now you walk around wondering why you feel empty, why joy is fleeting, why depth scares you. Why? Because you're not whole, you're fragmented. And fragments don't build futures, they repeat pasts until you confront that attachment. It owns you not like a chain, but like a whisper, a persistent echo in the back of your mind, a feeling you can't name, but can't escape. That's what happens when you confuse removal with resolution. You don't need to go back to her, you need to go back to the parts of yourself that met her, because those parts are still waiting to be seen, still asking to be seen. And healing doesn't come from distance, it comes from depth. You don't get stronger by forgetting, you get stronger by remembering clearly, honestly, painfully. So if you truly want to move on, don't cut her off, cut into the emotion, dissect it, learn from it, and then, only then does the attachment truly dissolve, not through absence, but through understanding. You don't stop feeling her just because she's no longer present, because she was never just a person, she was a symbol, a living embodiment of something ancient, something wired into your instincts. She was more than her voice, her body. Her name, she was a representation of everything you reached for. She filled a role inside you that existed long before she arrived, and when she left, the role remained, aching, echoing. Waiting, the feminine isn't erased through absence, it mutates, it hides in your memories, in your fantasies. In your fears, she becomes the story you keep rewriting but never finish. You don't miss her, you miss what she activated in you. The comfort, the chaos, the mirror, the test, even in anger. You're still connected to her because rage is energy tied to meaning. And meaning doesn't disappear. You can walk 1,000 miles and still feel her name behind your teeth. You can delete her photos, block her number, throw away the gifts, but you can't delete the architecture she left behind. She shaped the way you respond to intimacy. She influenced the way you interpret silence. She changed what you look for when you search for someone new. And even if you try to replace her, you're really just trying to replace the feeling, that gravitational pull she had on your emotional core. Because it wasn't just love, it was initiation. She initiated you into another layer of yourself. She revealed who you could be or who you were afraid to become. And now you're stuck between who you were before her and who you are without her. That space is haunted not by her ghost, but by your transformation. You're chasing the idea of her. Not the woman, because the idea is what fused to your identity. She became a myth the moment she left, and myths are far more powerful than memories. She exists now in symbols, in a scent that shakes your chest, in a stranger's laugh that hits too deep, in the eyes of a new lover who doesn't understand why you hesitate. The feminine archetype doesn't. Permission to stay claims territory once she's been let in. She takes root in places you didn't know existed. Your heart doesn't beat the same. Your ambition feels different. Even your pain carries her fingerprint. And still, you pretend you've moved on. You act like she's been exorcised, but in truth, You've only built shrines to her. In the shadows of your life, she's the standard you secretly measure others against, the warning sign you use to protect your scars, the dream you can't control. When your guard is down, she lingers in the space between. Your words in the pauses when someone asks what happened with her. You don't speak it out loud because saying it would admit she still holds weight. And weight means power, but she already has power not over you, but through you, because her essence is entangled with your growth. Every time you matured during that relationship, every fear you faced, every truth you confessed, every time she broke you open or helped you rebuild, that became a part of your evolution. You can't amputate parts of your growth. Without bleeding out, she is in your development, in your story, in your shadow, in your strength you stray into you. Off means freedom, but sometimes freedom is just another word for avoidance. You didn't sever the connection, you buried it. And buried things don't die, they bloom in the dark. You see her in art, in music, in pain. You hear her in metaphors, feel her in hesitation, smell her in nostalgia. Even your silence around her is a form of communication. Your attempt to forget is a tribute to how unforgettable she is. You don't forget archetypes, you reconcile with them. And if you don't, they rule you from the subconscious. You'll date her shadow in every woman you meet. You'll attract her opposite in the hope of finding balance. You'll punish others for the emotion she left unhealed. That's not moving on, that's being puppeteered. You don't see it because it's subtle, it doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up in your timing, in the way you pull back, right when the things get close, in the way you chase, but never land, in the way you flirt, but never trust you want to be untouched. Unaffected, but you were touched by something eternal. The feminine isn't weak, it's elemental, it breaks down walls. That logic built, it reaches into the soul when nothing else can end. If she ever saw the real you, even for a moment, then she touched something sacred, and sacred things don't disappear. They become part of your internal language. They become metaphors for everything you want, but are afraid to want again. You try to speak in new tones. But her rhythm lives in your voice. You try to rewrite your standards. But her silhouette remains in the margins. You try to erase her. But she's written in the ink of who you are now. She lives in your restraint, in your urgency, in your memory of what mattered even when you try to convince yourself it didn't. You can't fake detachment without revealing attachment. Your energy tells the truth before your words do. Your choices speak louder than your intentions. You date her echo. You fight her reflection. You grieve the version of her you never got to keep, and the version of yourself she once believed, and she gave shape to things you never named. She gave voice to needs you didn't know you had. She brought order to some parts and chaos to others, and when she left, both the order and the chaos stayed behind. You didn't let go. You let her live inside the unresolved. And the unresolved doesn't stay quiet. It replays, rewrites, reinvents. And you live inside those loops. Thinking time will fix them, but time doesn't heal archetypes. Only awareness does. You have to see her clearly, not as the villain, not as the fantasy, but as the key, because the real question isn't, why is she still in my head? It's, what did she represent that I haven't faced? You don't escape pain by pretending it never happened. You bury it, disguise it, name it something else, but it never leaves. It just waits in silence for a weaker moment. Avoidance is not healing. It is self-deception. You don't become stronger by refusing to feel. You become numb, detached, hollowed from the inside. Men call it stoicism, but often it's just paralysis dressed as pride. You didn't solve anything by cutting her off. You just deferred the confrontation. And what is postponed emotionally will always return physiologically. It comes back in sleepless nights. In misdirected rage, in unexplained emptiness, the mind tries to ignore what the body keeps remembering. She touched something deep in you, and now you're running from it, but running doesn't make you free. It makes you a fugitive from your own psyche, repressed emotions. Don't disappear. They distort, they twist your ability to trust, to love, to open again. You think you're guarded, but you're just locked in. No one else can enter because you never cleaned the wreckage she left behind. You fear love not because of what it is, but because of what it cost you. You can't form new connections on a foundation cracked by unresolved grief. You keep trying to build futures with hands that still shake from the past. You smile, but the pain leaks through the cracks in your voice. You move on physically, but mentally you're still standing in the ruin. She's gone, but the collapse still echoes through your nervous system. You blame her for walking away, but you've never faced the part of you that let it fall apart. You demonize her in private, but secretly you're haunted by what you didn't say. You claim indifference, but silence is just a mask for unresolved impact. You tell yourself she meant nothing, yet her absence screams every time you're alone. You say she's replaceable, yet no one since has made you feel the same. You date new faces, but compare them to her shadow. You change partners, but you never change the pain. You're loyal to the version of you that was wounded, and that version keeps sabotaging every chance at peace. You rehearse strength, but true power is emotional honesty. You've learned to survive, but not to live. You avoid vulnerability like it's weakness, when in truth it's the gateway to evolution. Emotions aren't obstacles, they are messengers. And when you kill the messenger, you lose the lesson. You can't repress pain and expect to keep the wisdom. You numb the heart, and the soul stops growing. You become emotionally paralyzed, functionally alone. Every smile becomes performance. Every touch feels foreign. You can't feel love. If you won't feel loss, you can't feel trust. If you won't risk being hurt, you can't feel peace. If you won't process your chaos. And chaos doesn't disappear. When you ignore it, it multiplies. You drink to forget. But forgetfulness isn't freedom. You chase distractions, but distraction only deepens the emptiness. You try to move on, but you're still shackled to her in silence. You think cutting her off gave you control, but control without emotional clarity is just another form of imprisonment. You traded connection for safety, but now you feel nothing at all. Numbness isn't victory, it's emotional starvation. You tell yourself love isn't worth the risk, but it's not love you fear, it's the mirror it holds to your wounds you were. But you also lost the version of you that once believed in something pure. Now you walk through life armored. But armor makes it hard to be held. You keep people at arm's length because closeness reminds you of the fallout. You fear silence because it reminds you of her absence. You fear intimacy because it threatens to expose the scar. You refuse to name you. Build walls so high even your own reflection can't reach you. You crave connection, but sabotage it before it starts. You demand loyalty while withholding vulnerability. You want to be seen but refuse to be known. You ghost yourself before anyone else can leave. You wear detachment like a shield, but bleed behind closed doors. You joke about the past to cover the ache that still lingers. You sleep next to strangers, but dream of unresolved yesterdays. You crave the intensity, but fear the cost. You fear the cost because you never learned the currency of emotional truth. You walked away from her, but never retrieved the part of yourself she took with her. You speak of moving on, but your soul is still speaking her name in whispers. You can't start new chapters with unfinished sentences. You can't love again while still negotiating the terms of your last heartbreak. You want closure. But closure doesn't come from cutting, it comes from confronting. You need to grieve the dreams that never made it. You need to name the anger that never got voiced. You need to mourn the man you were when she first touched your soul. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means integrating. You don't erase the past, you learn to walk with it. You don't reject the emotion, you learn its language. You don't suppress your pain, you give it purpose. Pain is not weakness, it is the proof that you cared. And caring is not a flaw, it is the foundation of all transformation. You're not broken, you're unprocessed, you're not cold, you're wounded, you're not lost, you're resisting the path back to your heart. You keep telling yourself you're done with her, but you haven't even started the real work yet because the work isn't forgetting her name. The work is remembering yours. You thought cutting her off would make you invincible, but all it did was reveal how deeply you were already wounded. You didn't walk away clean. You walked away bleeding, silent, and pretending the scar was armor. You convinced yourself she was the problem, but in doing so, you ignored the one person you'll never escape yourself. You tried to delete the memory, but what you really erased was your own access to meaning. Because when you cut off the feminine, not just the woman, but the archetype, you sever your link to growth, chaos, creation, and depth. She wasn't just someone you loved, she was a mirror, a trigger, a test. And you failed not because she left, but because you refused to face what her presence exposed. This isn't about her. It never was. This is about the version of you that emerged in her presence and the version of you that died when you refused to process it. It's about the emotional debris you've been walking around with, calling it strength, calling it logic, calling it clarity, when really it's just the residue of unprocessed truth. The masculine without the feminine is blind, detached, dangerous not to others but to itself. When you bury pain, you bury purpose. When you bury love, you bury aliveness. You think you moved on. But you never moved through. And until you do, she will never truly leave. Not because she won't let go, but because deep down you won't.